All right, we're now recording.
Great. So good evening, everyone. We are getting ready to start the Region 7 Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting for Monday, January 9th. And I'll start as we have in the past. First off, Happy New Year to everyone. I hope they had a great holiday. So I'd like to remind everyone that the role of the SAC as outlined in the charter is to play a key supporting and collaborative role by providing input and assistance in examining community challenges and opportunities related to land use, preparations of goals and strategies to implement a regional vision, and recommending changes in zoning. So that's what we're here to do. And so let's jump into the regular agenda. Welcome and call to order. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Calls to order. And then we'll start with an invitation for public comment to people who aren't on the committee but would like to talk about anything related to our tasks here and provide any input. And I'll remind everyone that we're going to keep that pretty limited to just a few minutes, but if they have the desire to provide more cumulative kind of input, they can do that by going to region7@aacounty.org. So let's take a look and see if there's anyone with their hand up or in the gallery that wants to talk with us, Patrick.
And we do have one attendee in the gallery who I will unmute if he would like to say anything at this point. And if not, that is fine.
Okay, so I don't see any hands up. Do you, Patrick and Desiree?
Nope, I don't. So I think we can close that portion.
Great. Okay, so so we're going to close the public comment. And again, people are certainly welcome to provide guidance to us via email. So we're always anxious to see that. Our first item is approval of the meeting notes from the prior meeting. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at those? They go back a little ways because our last meeting didn't count. I'm going to assume that everyone has had an opportunity to read through those and ask for a motion to approve the notes as presented.
I move we approve.
I'll second.
Great. Any objection to accepting those? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move that we accept the meeting notes as provided to us, and we'll put those in the record, Patrick and Desiree. So that's great.
Great, thank you.
So our next item is approval or overview of the remaining SAC meeting schedule. And Patrick, Desiree, you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, I can take over. If I can deviate just briefly, I want to introduce you all to two colleagues, two faces that you all don't know here. Andrew Lazara and Erica Phantom Vong. They are two new colleagues with the Office of Planning and Zoning here in Long Range Planning. So you may see them again, and they had both come up to me earlier today and asked if they could attend our meeting. And Andrew is actually going to help us out with taking meeting notes for us. So I wanted to just give a quick introduction of both of them to you guys, because you will probably see them again at some point. So thanks both of you for attending. Overview of the remaining SAC meeting schedule. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I had sent this out to you all a little while ago, and I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview so that you all know what to expect over the next couple of months, actually. So we've locked in some dates for the remaining SAC meetings. January is really going to be spent focusing in on those strategies that are going to be specific to Region 7. And you all have gotten the first round of some of those strategies for you to go ahead and start reviewing. I'm hoping that by the end of this week, we will be able to send the rest of those out to you all to give you ideally a couple of, I wanted to give you all a couple of weekends so that you could really spend some time and chew on those strategies and formulate some input for us. The meeting dates that you see here are staggered by day of the week. This is to try to help accommodate different SAC members and their own schedules. And our meetings right now, we're looking at all of them being in person, but we will have a virtual option for each of these meetings in case any of you need that for whatever reason. I do think some of these meetings are going to be a little bit, they're going to lend themselves a little bit more to in-person engagement, particularly when we get into land use and zoning issues and we want to have maps out that we're standing around and pointing to. So I would encourage, think about that for February, March, and the April meetings. That is when we'll be getting into land use and zoning a little bit more heavily for the region. Let me see. February, March, April. Yeah, so in February, we'll start by sharing some findings of our own internal technical analysis and how that aligns with our the population projections that are given to us by the Metropolitan Council. We'll get into any of the outcomes of outreach, public outreach that we've had related to land use and zoning. And ultimately, we're hoping that at that time, we will have a draft land use and zoning map that you all will endorse, and we can send those out to the public for review in May, for review and comment. And during that May timeframe, while the land use and zoning maps are out for public review, we will open an application window so that property owners in the region can submit applications for changes to the zoning on their property. And so we'll pull all of that information in during the month of May. Late June, we have a tentative meeting scheduled with you all. I've got it tentatively scheduled for June 21st, where we would pull you all back together and go over any of the public comments that we got on those the land use and zoning map and any of the applications for a zoning change that we will have received. So we'll get you all to weigh in at that point. And also at that point, we anticipate having a full draft of the plan. So all of the strategies that you will have looked at and seen, all of the mapping and all of the background information as well, full plan to look at and review and hopefully endorse at that point, so that we can then share it publicly in the month of July for public review. And then probably one last meeting in mid-August. I've got it scheduled, I've got it tentatively in my notes as August 24th, which I guess is really more toward the end of August, where you all might come back together and review any public comments and any recommended changes based on those comments to that full draft plan before the plan goes to the Planning Advisory Board, and that would be ideally late August. So that is the schedule as it stands right now. There are a few things that are up in the air a little bit, and I do want to well, first let me open it. Do you all have any comments or questions on that schedule? Okay. This is all, so I think the first several months through probably April are pretty well set. Some of the later dates may get shifted a little bit as we move forward. There are some things that are a little bit up in the air. I do want to give a couple of announcements. One, and I should have mentioned this earlier on. One of our colleagues, Elder Charles James, has indicated that he needed to resign from the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So we are now down to 14 of you on our committee. And we've also lost our planning and zoning officer, Steve Kai-Ziegler, who had come and spoken with you all earlier. He also resigned back in late December. And so that is all the information that I have on that at this point. I do know the county executive is, I don't know where, I know he's looking for another planning and zoning officer to appoint. So as soon as I know anything more about that, we will have that to share with you. But because of that, there could be some changes, some shifting in priorities and schedule. But as far as I can see, this is the schedule that we should expect to adhere to at least through April. There are some other legislative priorities that will need some discussion and buy-in with everybody once that director gets on board. So as soon as that happens, we will let you all know. Are there any more comments or questions on any of that before I move on? Okay.
Patrick, I'm good.
Okay, great. So let me share my screen again. The second or the third bullet under old business is it's listed as a charter discussion, and I wanted to, after Elder James had indicated that he needed to resign, our superiors here in long range planning and zoning had recommended that we consider an amendment to our SAC charter to consider potentially removing an SAC member if there's an absence of if there are 3 consecutive absences from our meetings, combined with a lack of any kind of communication or outreach. This was something that was brought up, I think, during the December meeting that ended up not happening as we were talking about that. And part of the reason for that is, according to the Open Meetings Act, when we don't have a quorum of SAC members or any committee member for the county, we're actually not supposed to meet at all. And that's kind of the case for December. It was unfortunate that folks had come out and then ended up, we weren't able to move forward with the meeting. So this potential change to the charter would then actually lower the number that we would need to have a quorum on our committee. And let me share my screen again so that you all can actually see this language. I shared this with you on Friday. So, and I would recommend, if this is a direction that the committee feels like we ought to go, I would probably recommend putting it under Title III, under roles of and responsibilities of the advisory committee. But considering this language, and you all can tweak this, a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee may be removed following 3 consecutive absences from a meeting of the SAC when combined with a lack of communication with either the SAC chair, vice chair, and/or OPZ staff. What thoughts does anybody have on this? I'd like to hear from you all.
I'm comfortable with that language.
So I have a question, Patrick. Is
Sure.
Is this retroactive? Like, is there anybody who at this point has not communicated for 2 or 3 meetings?
There's one person.
And no one else is in jeopardy at this point. We have one person who's not communicating.
We have one, that's right. And I'm looking at, I've logged the attendance for everyone, and yeah, this would affect one person.
Well,
So-
I'm supportive of the language then.
So is the intent then to use this retroactively, or is it just moving forward?
I think that's open for discussion with you all. I would defer to you all.
I think to be fair, we would be moving forward, right? Like,
I would agree with that.
So I have the other view, because I'm thinking if we're meeting on the 18th and 26th and 13th and so on, there aren't that many meetings left to go. And if we run into another situation where we're lacking quorum because of the denominator, it would make more sense to say that this would be in effect for anybody who at this point has 2 meetings, and give them one more chance.
It's kind of hard to hold somebody responsible for a policy that didn't exist in the beginning is my thinking. But most importantly, what I wanted to ask was, is this, have any other groups adopted this? Any of the other regional groups?
They have not. Mm-mm.
but had they had a need to adopt it, right? Like, this might be something that's kind of a unique issue to our region for whatever reason.
Yeah, we're the only ones that had to end up canceling a meeting for lack of a quorum. And I will say we've made a note. We do think that this was an oversight on our part, staff's part, to not include language such as this in the draft charter from the outset, that you all could have looked at and incorporated from the very beginning. So I think when we go to work on subsequent region plans, we will start off with a recommendation that this kind of language be in the charter.
So can I restate my issue then? As I recall, and I do believe it's hard to make somebody responsible for a rule that didn't exist. However, as I recall, the initial correspondence did indicate, and I believe we signed a document to the effect that we would be available. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah. So from that perspective, that language existed.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks.
But this is your committee, and I think you all need to be comfortable with the charter and with this amendment or otherwise.
So,
So Patrick, would this amendment only be for Region 7, or would all of the regions be adopting this moving forward?
This would be just for us region. Our charter is already slightly different than the other regions. And so this would just be an amendment to the Region 7 SAC charter. But like I said, going forward, when we do other regions in the county, we will add this into the starting point.
I have no problem with the language.
I have a problem with it using it retro. As someone who's personally had challenges making the meetings, I could say looking backward, that would just be, I feel, that it's, I think moving forward, I think it makes sense. I think looking backward, it seems a little harsh.
Yeah, I agree. I'm comfortable with the language moving forward.
I would agree with that. I'm comfortable with the language as moving forward. I mean, we're not really trying to punish anybody per se. We're just trying to encourage people to attend. And so I think moving forward, at least for me, makes sense.
yeah, let's keep in mind, this is really more housekeeping than anything else, because the majority of the members who can't make a meeting reach out to Patrick and Desiree or myself and say, hey, I'm not going to be here. They can look at the recorded session. So it's really about exercising some, level of commitment and just letting us know. So it's not that it's not that you can't miss 3 meetings. It's that you can't miss them and not tell us you're going to miss them, because it just, makes it difficult for those who do to, make their schedules work. Because if we don't have a quorum, it's complicated. So But that said, I mean, I agree, like, you know, we could probably do just as well saying this is our policy moving forward and stop it at that point.
So should we then ask for a motion to that effect to add this to the, add this language to the SAC charter and have it not retroactive, but moving forward?
I think that's the motion on the floor right now. So
Okay.
let's say that that is in fact the motion, and let's go ahead and have a vote. And all in favor, say aye.
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 Was there a second to the motion?
I don't think I asked for it. That's my mistake. So do I have a second?
Second.
Great. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion carries. Let's go ahead and put that in there. And thanks for taking care of that, Patrick and Desiree.
Sure, thank you. Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Desiree.
Okay, I will share my screen then.
I have a
Okay,
quick
everyone.
question. Patrick, will you let everybody, other members know I mean, moving forward, you'll help them understand that, right? If they aren't.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. I was just thinking
Absolutely.
that's another-
And this is going to be it'll be in the meeting notes
in
as
the
well.
meeting
So,
minutes, of
yes,
course. Thank you.
yes. Thank you, Kate.
But we'll include it in the next email just so that everyone is aware.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think from here we can transition into the vision statement. So just to remind everyone kind of where we stand with that, we developed a subcommittee that was Anna, Priscilla, and Tony, and this was back in November. I think we started on this process. So we got the three of us or the four of us huddled together and sort of worked on a draft for everyone to hopefully kind of review and sign off on. So we kind of got the ball rolling, and now hopefully we can kind of just review what we've had. I think you've all seen it at this point. We send it out in an email, but just to kind of briefly go over what a vision statement is. It is intended to be a statement of the community's values and aspirations. And it's intended to be looking out over the planning horizon of the document. So, you know, the next 10 to 20 years, what do we as a region want to accomplish? And it should be written in a short, concise voice, and it should be outcome based. So we're writing it as if we've achieved this this goal. So it shouldn't be written as we want to do this. It should be we have achieved this. So let's see. Just to give you an example, this was the Plan 2040 vision statement. So it's pretty short and concise. It's by embracing its rich Chesapeake culture and heritage, invaluable ecosystems, and emerging opportunities, Anne Arundel County embodies the best of both the past and future, providing its residents a place where all are proud to live, work, learn, and play. So again, that was the Plan 2040, the General Development Plan vision statement. What we drafted initially in the subcommittee group was this statement here. Residents of Region 7 experience a high quality of life. We cherish and protect our natural resources and diversity and have a community that offers housing for all, safe and efficient transit, bike and pedestrian options, traffic flow, and access to our parks and waterways make people want to live here. Access to our resources, local merchants, and businesses is available to all. So just to give you a sense of, I thought I'd pull up, this is Plan 2040, and this is kind of where the vision statement lived in Plan 2040. You know, it's sort of just one statement that kind of captures, you know, what this plan should achieve and what we've heard from from everyone in this planning process as to what we want to accomplish. So with that, we sent that out to you guys, and we did get some initial feedback from a few of you. So this is kind of a we heard some considerations about needing to talk about coordination between the city and county. We also heard about, we should mention the nature of this being a peninsula and the constraints that go along with that. And then we also heard, maybe we should mention smart growth and the importance of smart growth development and planning. So these are some modifications we've made, the underlines being additions, and then obviously the strikeouts just kind of being replacement. So this is kind of where we've left it for now, just based on some of the initial feedback we've heard, but this is still open for discussion. So this, I'll just read it. Residents of Region 7 experience a high quality of life due to sound, smart growth planning and development policy. We cherish and protect our peninsula's natural resources and diversity, and have a community that offers housing for all. Safe and efficient transit, bike and pedestrian options, traffic flow, and access to our parks and waterways are well coordinated across jurisdictions and make people want to live here. Local merchants and businesses are thriving and accessible to all. So with that, I think, we are at a point where we've tried to we've heard from some of you, heard from a lot of you. We, obviously don't want to spend too much time on this, but we wanted to kind of gauge what everyone's thoughts were, and if this is something we can move forward with, or if there are any strong opinions at this point.
Desiree, as I look at this, there's something that I just realized with the safe and efficient transit. I think it needs to be affordable. And one thing that we've talked about is making a different type of transit. So I think if it's said affordable, because again, it can be efficient and it can be safe, but if it's not affordable, no one's going to use it.
Okay.
Just a thought. I'm not wed to it, but it has a lot to do with a lot of thinking that Lily and I have been talking about. So a lot of options. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an important point, I think. Okay. Before I just start making tweaks here, do others want to weigh in, or do others agree, disagree, or have other points to make?
I would say that I really liked the very first draft. I thought when I read it, I was like, wow, this is really good. But the revisions that you made are really good too. I'll say that I'm having a bit of heartburn about the sound, smart growth planning and development policy. And maybe it's just the way that it's worded. We can influence policy, but we can't make policy, right? So
Okay.
Well, this document it's a policy document. It's not, the region plan is not going to be regulatory. Is that what you're thinking about? Is that kind of what you're speaking to?
I probably have that lens. Yeah. I don't know. It sounded the vision statement sounded very approachable previously. This one sounds a little more, I don't know. Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
sound,
Yeah.
smart growth. It sounds sort of, yes, jargony.
Some may ask, what is that?
Right. And what is the development policy? This needs to be very high level, right?
I
It does.
agree. I think it makes it unrelatable. It just, it makes it sound like it was done by a bunch of bureaucrats.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so let me ask, do you think
I think
so
the
we were
I think the smart growth is actually an important part, because that's really what we're talking about, right?
right. So I think a question
totally
is, do we see an area that we could keep, a way we could keep smart growth in here, but maybe change it, remove it from the sentence or include it somewhere else that would make sense and not sound
Remember that-
jargony.
But this vision statement is the outcome. It's not necessarily how you got there. And by putting in due to smart growth, it's talking about the process that you use to get there. So that's why it's really not necessary. It's
Can we go back to the first statement, Desiree?
Sure.
I love residents of Region 7 experience a high quality of life, because that's really what we're talking about, is quality of life issues.
So do we think that, is this necessary to have it spelled out like you were saying, Priscilla? I think it is an outcome statement. And that's sort of what I struggled with, is how do we include kind of a process term with we've already achieved this? I mean, I do like the term and sort of noting it's, noting that we're thinking through this planning development policy, and so that's attributing, creating a high quality of life, or that there are positive aspects of it. But I don't know if it's necessary to leave it. Do you think is everyone on board with just leaving this sentence as is? Just
Well-
residents of Region 7 experience a high quality of life?
Well, let me talk to this a little bit, because I think this might be the result of some of the comments that I provided when we were talking about what was originally proffered. And the challenge for me was that, we are, a fairly urban component of the county, and the way we're going to impact the development patterns moving forward is going to be based on something. And I'd rather it be based on, sound, smart growth, planning and development policy. And, the rest of it is pretty dreamy to me. I mean, it's really nice, but it's very kind of natural environment focused. And yeah, we all agree, I believe, that that's a really important component of where we are, but we have pressures that are going to be asking us to, provide room for growth. And so how do we do that successfully? And I think, the vision should be that we're doing it because we're applying principles that are consistent with, smart growth techniques. So I felt like it was important to include that, because the rest of it could apply to any component of a master plan. I think ours is unique. So that's where I was thinking when I came up with that.
I think it's a separate sentence, because I like the impact of residents of Region 7 experience a high quality of life. I'm not sure the smart growth and planning and development policy follows immediately after that sentence. And I understand what you're saying, Leo. But I think the fact that we experience a high quality of life is because of all the things that we're talking about in this paragraph, not just the smart growth planning and development policy. So I think it's a separate thought.
That makes sense to me.
couldn't that be in the mission statement rather than the vision statement?
Or in goals? Do we have goals?
Yeah, it is something that's outlined in Plan 2040. So the Region 7 plan will by virtue of that, be a smart growth led, document.
Any other
then-
thoughts on this
Yeah,
statement?
so then
or-
in my mind, it doesn't need to be right here, in a vision statement. I think vision statements are a little dreamy. I think that's what they're meant to be.
I
Just
think
a
that's
thought.
fair. I think
Yeah,
that's
but if you look at our area, going back to what Leo's saying, really what we're saying, there's just a couple of areas that we're really looking to kind of concentrate whatever growth may occur. And somehow that might be different in our region than versus anything else. And so somehow for me, incorporating the notion that that's really what smart growth is looking to do in areas where you have the capacities to be able to achieve that, I think it's important. And I agree that it could be a separate point, doesn't follow in the first sentence.
Okay, so
So
should
Desiree,
we?
work your magic. Find another sentence.
I know, I'm trying to think, can I come up with another sentence right now?
I think it could preface the safe and efficient transit. I mean, say something along, smart growth. I don't know, encompasses safe and efficient and affordable transit something along those lines. I don't know if it gets too wordy at that point, but
I mean, smart growth really is the mechanism. It offers housing for all, safe and efficient transit, bike, and et cetera. So maybe that's how you think about incorporating it.
So,
That was
so
gonna
maybe,
be, that was gonna be my suggestion because of smart growth planning and development policy, blah, blah, blah.
I have one idea because I feel like Desiree, you're kind of in the hot seat, like being tasked to it
Sorry,
on
Desiree.
in front of everybody right now, come up with, this revision. If you all want, if anybody has any other thoughts on the vision statement, you can throw them out now. And then if you want, I could talk about the Parole Town Center. I think that presentation will take about a half hour and maybe a bit longer if, for any discussion. And then we could come back to that and let you kind of work in the background, Desiree. And then we can
Sure.
revisit this. What do the rest of you all think about that idea?
That
I see
sounds
a
good to me.
thumbs up.
Do you want us
Okay.
to point out any other questions?
Yeah, I
or
was gonna
concerns
say
in it?
before we move on, is there any other, so this sentence we need to work on and incorporate somewhere else. Is there any other part of the, what about this revision, or do we
Okay,
like
so-
this instead, or, are we okay with everything else?
I just want to comment that I don't want to lose the access to resources. And maybe that can be put up in the previous access to our parks and waterways and resources or something. Because the resources include parks and waterways, but there are other resources as well. And if we put it in the way it's crossed out now, then they're not in there at all.
Okay. Could we, I think we decided to remove it because of this. We thought it was a little bit redundant, but what if we put explicitly here, local merchants?
Well, how about, or say access to our resources, including parks and waterways.
Our parks and
Yeah.
resources, you said?
No,
Yeah, access to our
resources, including parks and waterways. Because then you're not excluding other things, but you're identifying specifically parks and waterways. I don't know.
How do we feel about that?
Well, you could also make the case that you could take after traffic flow, just stop the sentence there and then add access to our resources, down at the bottom where the crossed out sentence is.
Safe and efficient transit, bike and pedestrian options, traffic flow, and access to our
Mhm.
parks and waterways. And stop it there. Where would we stop it, Leo?
I'm just trying to separate the one that speaks to transit issues and the one that talks about access to resources. It seems like maybe they're just separate things.
Yeah,
You're
so I
saying
think
in traffic flow and then stop it there. So
Mhm.
options and traffic flow, period. Is that what you're saying, Leo?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so Desiree, I think what it would be is something like we have safe and efficient transit, bike and pedestrian options and traffic flow, period. Access to our resources, including parks and waterways.
But I
on
think
and
the
on.
well-coordinated goes back to training.
Yeah,
too, right?
exactly.
So,
So I
yeah,
think we'd be removing this.
Okay.
Right.
And then we would be putting it,
Okay.
so like incorporating it here.
Is traffic flow really necessary to call out?
It tends to be the number one.
Yeah,
that's
In
a
Region
big,
7, oh,
that's a
absolutely.
big, that's a biggie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge one.
so
But what are we really saying here? That it's safe and efficient? I mean, what are we trying to say, right? It just
I
says
think-
traffic flow.
I think the point is that they are accessible and well coordinated across across the city and the region, I think is the main point of this sentence. So it's key to keep it are well coordinated across jurisdictions and make people, I think those need to stay
Mhm.
together.
So then the
Um,
access to our resources, including parks and waterways, should come out.
I mean, I think we could argue that could also be well coordinated, that
Mhm.
that someone living in the city, also visits county parks, and that it's kind of the nature of where the city is in the county, that being well coordinated and planned for, I think is part of it.
Can you define jurisdictions for me? Is that the whole county, or is that the city and the county, or
The city and in this case, the city and the county, I think is.
could we just say
How I-
across the city and county?
Or region?
Yeah, isn't it Region 7? Isn't that the jurisdiction that we're discussing?
Well, when you're
Yeah,
talking
but the
about
city's
traffic,
not really part of it.
but when you're talking about these various resources within Region 7, you're also talking about state resources and county and
Mhm.
city, because, that's just the way it is.
And I think, Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that added piece about coordination across jurisdictions was a comment from one of you guys on the SAC. Somebody had mentioned
Yeah.
actually calling that out in the vision statement.
I just question what it is. I'm not saying it's a bad word. I just don't know the definition in this context.
I think it's trying to address that first bullet below under other considerations, coordination between city and county. And then as I think it was you that said it, Linda, that yes, there is, in terms of transportation, state jurisdiction and even federal.
I just reread the sentence. I think it makes a lot of sense to me now that we've talked it through, so I'm fine with it.
Okay. Well, Priscilla, do you think that do you think that this sentence should stay as is, and we should focus on trying to include resources somewhere in this sentence so that it's not left off? Or
So what would resources be that would be beyond parks and waterways? That would be part of our charge.
Open space,
Oh, okay.
Scale. I think of, from a design perspective, the different elements of design and, relationships of buildings. And
It could be any,
neighborhoods.
it could be any
Wall.
public facilities as well, EMS and police and schools
Okay.
and whatnot.
And walking trails, which are not necessarily parks. I mean, there's just so many
Mhm.
things, bike
Mhm.
trails. Is there some way to take out, just do something different with, I just think that's a run-on sentence, to take the well-coordinated jurisdictions and make that a separate sentence and say, I don't know, everything is, I don't know. It's just too long. I can't come up with a solution.
It could be something like we have safe all the way through waterways, semicolon. These are well coordinated, just so that it's a different phrase at least, or a.
Well, let's look at it this way. Let's say, do we have the components in here that we think we want to make sure we've included? And I would say that's the first question. And the second is, does it need some wordsmithing to separate them so we're not trying to kind of join two thoughts into a single sentence? And we could probably restructure a little bit, but it seems to me that we've got the pieces in here that we want to include. We just don't have them wordsmithed the way we would like them to be. Does that sound right to everyone?
I would agree with you, Leo, and maybe to the point, Patrick, you made a few minutes ago, maybe assuming that we do have the points and it's just now a matter of kind of wordsmithing, we could kind of, move to review parole, and Desiree or somebody could look at this and maybe we could come back and revisit at the end.
Yeah, or we could look at a new draft of this,
Or
at the
send
next
out a new
meeting.
draft. That's fine.
Just to keep us moving this evening.
Fine.
But I'm trying to make sure that, I don't want to rush through it because it is important. And I want to make sure that everyone feels we have, in general, the components they're hoping to have included. Does anyone not feel that way?
I agree with you, Leo. I think that's if we know we have the basic items here and then be able to present it at the next meeting, that seems like a good call.
Okay. Does that sound right to you, Patrick and Desiree?
That works for me. And yeah, if you all would like, I can get into the Parole Town Center, and I don't know, maybe if there's 15 minutes at the end, we could, Desiree can work her magic and present something again at the end. If
This
we
is
have
a lot
time.
of pressure, guys. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not on board with that. I think
Okay.
to wrap these types of things is just, it takes a little bit of time on your own to kind of structure it.
Yeah.
So I would
Okay.
suggest that maybe, we work on it and bring it back to the group for the next meeting. And then we could probably put a wrap on it pretty quickly. That's
Fair
my,
enough. Fair enough.
yeah. And we're happy to have another discussion about it at that point. But I think, let's get into
Okay.
parole discussion and we'll circle back on this. I feel pretty good that we're close.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
You're off the hook for tonight, Desiree.
If I come up with anything magical by the time parole's over, I will share it.
Fair enough. I want to be able to pay attention to this.
All right. Great. Thank you all for that. Okay, I will give you all an overview of the Parole Town Center. Let me share my screen. Okay. Whoops. All right. Yeah, so I wanted to take a minute to provide an overview of the draft Parole Town Center master plan. This is something that guides development policy in the full Parole Town Center. And it's an update that started actually some time ago. I'll kind of go through that timeline in a bit. While the parole master plan update, it's something that is a bit outside of the scope of the stakeholder advisory committee. I think so many of the recommendations that are drafted really hit on a lot of the things that I'm hearing from you all as we've been talking about the issues in this region, density, mixed use, and housing needs and whatnot. So I really wanted to go through this with you all and give you a sense of where this stands. So first, you'll recall that Plan 2040 set a policy framework in the development policy area map. Desiree talked about this a little while ago, and it really helps guide the location and the type of development in different areas. It prioritizes areas for conservation, and then guides investments in public services and infrastructure. So one of these policy areas is the town center policy area, and you'll see it designated this area in pink here. There's also Plan 2040 also put a transit-oriented overlay policy area designation. You'll see in the hatched areas here. These are areas within a half mile of the proposed transit stations that are at the mall and at the Truman Parkway Park and Ride. And both of those policy areas are really classified as some of the county's growth areas or targeted development, redevelopment, and revitalization policy areas. So the town center area, it really applies to everything that's west of the county line, extending over to Housley Road, down Riva Road to the county offices, and then west on General's Highway, or I'm sorry, on Veterans Highway, just a little bit as well. So that's the full Parole Town Center Parole Town Center and the subject of this master plan area. Now, some background on the master plan update. The Parole Town Center has been designated as such ever since the 1978 General Development Plan, which named it as a place in the county or where the county would encourage the establishment and growth of business and services, and it would be an employment center and higher density residential. So ever since the 70s, this has been sort of the vision for this area. The town center designation was carried forward into the 2009 General Development Plan and into Plan 2040. And as I said, it's an area that is really targeted for development and investment in order to absorb the growth that would otherwise occur elsewhere in the region and in the rest of the or in the other parts of the county surrounding, like Crownsville and South County. The current master plan, which you see on the left there, that's from 1994, and it's what's in place right now. It had a vision for this area to have a mix of uses and more residential development, greater development intensity. The vision was also for a more urban and compact pattern of development, more walkable. And so this update is really intended to address some of the things that really weren't achieved since 1994. Things like the area really lacks a complete and connected bike and pedestrian network, getting into parole and within parole, so both. There's kind of a lack of public amenities and a need for some infrastructure investment. The suburban development pattern from the past, it still persists in this area. And the framework for development guidance that was really recommended by the 1994 plan, that framework generally works, but it's become a little bit complex and complicated. So this update was really started to try to address some of those things. And the update began back in 2017, and work was paused, I guess, about a year later to really refocus our staff resources on the Plan 2040 effort, and also to allow a couple of transportation studies to be carried out and help inform the plan for parole. So we picked this back up again after the Plan 2040 adoption, and now we're coordinating, as I mentioned, with the timing for some other legislative priorities, but we're hoping to move through adoption sometime in the next few months. So in this update process, there's been a lot of public outreach to the general public, to stakeholder groups, and interviews of certain stakeholders. And we've heard a lot of things from these groups. It's number one challenge is challenges with mobility, and particularly bike, pedestrian, and transit mobility, both within and outside of the Parole Town Center, and connections into the city's networks. There's a lot of concern with adequate infrastructure, particularly traffic congestion, as we just talked about. a lot of people brought up concerns about changes in the retail environment and how particularly the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated some of the challenges that were facing retail nationally. We're seeing it on the ground in this area and even in parole. A lot of people talked about limited access to parks and green space and natural areas in parole, and a general lack of a sense of place in parole. This community feel that makes people have a connection to a place. That's something that's kind of lacking in the parole town center. But all of these things are also opportunities that can be addressed in this master plan update. And we hope that we are doing that. There is a strong market for development in parole relative to other parts of the county, and there are real opportunities for helping to address housing for all income levels and stages of life in this area. So the Parole Town Center does, this is the, the vision. I'm not going to read all of this to you all, but just like the vision for the region, the Parole Master Plan does start with a vision. And the key point really is just that the vision remains similar for the Parole Town Center as it has been in the past, a dense,
What happened?
compact, and urban scale community. I'm sorry, what was that?
Okay. All right. Well, she can come over.
Okay.
Yes.
So the vision remains the same as it has been in the past. And this is consistent with what Plan 2040 provided for this area. Now, we did send a draft of the draft parole master plan. It has gone to the Planning Advisory Board, and so this and the next several slides really reflects the provisions that they saw. Development in the Parole Town Center, it's guided by provisions that are outlined in what's called an overlay zone. So these are provisions that guide development in this area, and they apply over and in addition to the underlying zoning requirements that apply to properties in parole. So these overlay provisions are recommended in this draft plan to be structured and applied by 7 sub areas in the town center. And this will help to promote the vision of parole as distinct from other parts of the county and help reinforce the idea that parole is dense and not suburban, and that it's going to absorb some of the growth pressure from the other parts of the region. I won't go too deep into specific provisions related to this, but I will point out here that the provisions are aligned to create three tiers of density, where the most intensive development would happen here in the core area. And the kind of the second tier of density would be in this Church Creek district and this Parole North district, which includes the mall area here, just for a frame of reference. Church Creek is the festival at Riva is here, and the Harbor Center and the Amish Market are located in this area here. So, and then the top tier of density is the Annapolis Town Center, and that area is the core area. So that's just an orientation for everybody. The draft plan, I won't go too deep into this, but the height and density allowances that are called for through the overlay provisions, these are applied by those sub areas on the previous slide. And again, the most intensive development is in the core district, and then these next to the Parole North and the Church Creek district here. These provisions, though, look very similar to what's already in the code and allowed currently. So there's not a huge amount of change to what we call the base regulations for what's allowed in Parole Town Center. Now, there is what's called an incentive program in Parole Town Center, and what that is it's a mechanism that really allows for flexibility for development projects that come through. And a development project can actually request additional density in the form of building taller buildings or having reduced open area requirements if they're willing to provide a higher number of amenities or a higher quality development or some other kind of public benefit that's really above and beyond what is already required by code. And that flexibility allows for deviations from the regulations. And it's important to allow for property owners to be able to pivot kind of quickly to market changes and develop sites that are developed in a way that makes sense for specific sites. So the incentive program is something that's in place now. And so again, most of these provisions are very similar to what's allowed currently in the parole overlay
But
provisions.
am I correct in assuming that there isn't anything from an incentive point of view that would encourage kind of workforce housing or diversity or non-market rate housing?
There's not a requirement in parole currently, but it is something that's listed in this draft, in the draft provisions as something that can be potentially proffered, for lack of a better word, through the incentive program as one of those things that's kind of above and beyond the requirements, the base requirements. And so, yeah, it is something that can be offered up.
Okay.
The draft plan does have some recommendations for different uses. As I mentioned before, the uses will be determined by the underlying zoning district, but with additional provisions and additional allowances and additional conditions that are applied by this overlay. So some of the additional allowances currently, even though mixed use is part of the vision for the Parole Town Center, currently mixed use isn't permitted by right throughout the Parole Town Center. You have to go through the incentive program in order to have a mixed use project. And so we're recommending to change that and permit mixed use development throughout parole by right without having to go through the incentive program. We are proposing that there be some conditions for certain uses to help promote a more urban character, particularly in some of the first and second tier of density, those sub areas. So we're recommending that new gas stations in those more intense sub areas have conditions like requiring pumps be located to the rear of a building, building materials and storage and loading areas need to be toward the rear of a site. We're recommending that self-storage as a standalone use not be permitted in the Parole Town Center, but only as an auxiliary use or part of a mixed use development, and then with loading to the rear. And we're also recommending that auto sales in the most intense sub areas be located primarily within an enclosed showroom. So again, kind of addressing these and how these can be a little bit more urban in scale and character. We do have some recommendations for some uses to become non-permitted uses in the region or in the town center. And some of those are things you wouldn't be too surprised with, like certain heavy manufacturing and industrial materials types of uses, but some that are uses that could be impacted now would be auto sales. We do have auto sales in the town center currently. Single family detached homes and then duplex and semi-detached homes. We are recommending that those become non-permitted uses. And what would happen in those cases is that those would become non-conforming uses. But the idea would be that new uses of that sort wouldn't come into the town center. And particularly with the single family and the duplex, the idea would be that really the town center is where more intensive residential developments and multifamily development, something more than duplexes, would really be most appropriate in the town center area where we've got access to transit and all of the other infrastructure that we've talked about. The draft master plan does have streetscape provisions promoting narrower or closer setbacks that will help promote a more urban character. So setbacks of 0 feet to 35 feet in the more intense sub areas, and then 15 to 60 feet in sort of the outlying sub areas. And then we're recommending what we call active frontage guidelines on certain identified corridors. So many of the streets in the core sub area along Riva Road, Forest Drive, West Street, and Jennifer Road, these would have some additional guidelines that would call for things like building elements, like the front facade and main entrance and human scale features would be on the street and addressing the street, large windows, creative signage, and public gathering spaces, these kinds of things that promote more visual engagement between the building and the street and help attract pedestrians, encourage them to really perceive the area or the street as a place. Now, there are a lot of draft transportation provisions that are recommended in this draft plan. I mentioned that there were a couple of transportation studies at the outset that were carried out by our Office of Transportation. One was what was called the Parole Mobility Study, and this study looked at the whole town center, but also an area stretching all the way into the city of Annapolis over to Chinkapin Round Road. And with that as their study area, they really they modeled the projected growth for the Parole Town Center, and even modeled a more aggressive growth pattern than what is projected, and developed some roadway and bike ped and transit recommendations that I'll discuss with you in a little bit. They also recommended revising the adequate public facilities and traffic impact statement requirements for the town center to really apply more to an urban context. And we do have an APF study group that's still looking at this, and APF throughout the county. But these would potentially allow for a more urban level of service in the more intensive tiers of the town center, and raise trip generation thresholds, and require a traffic impact study to really look at the impact of all of the modes that would be affected by a project, including beyond just the town center and into the city of Annapolis. So those are some, I think, important recommendations. There's also a recommendation for a town center-wide parking study to better understand the need for parking, and to recommend changes to our parking minimums and other standards. This was something that people have brought up a lot. Can we reduce our parking requirements for the town center? And without a study of that nature, we just weren't comfortable yet recommending changes to the parking requirements as they stand now. We do have existing parking requirements for structured parking for retail and office uses. And so we felt like it was important to retain that until we have some data from a parking study that we can really point to and help refine our parking requirements. There are also recommendations for access management along key corridors in the Parole Town Center. And with these, it's really encouraging developments to provide shared alleys and drive lanes and parking connections across adjacent properties, so that people who visit properties off of one of these corridors, they don't have to get out onto a corridor in order to go 2 doors down. They can drive through connections between adjacent sites. So these are some of the recommendations in the plan for transportation. There are roadway typologies. These were developed from the mobility study and are based on the county's complete streets guidance. And it really represents an optimal condition for road design to strive to meet. And it's a way of making sure that we're including bicycle and pedestrian facilities on our roadways as our projects come through. So broadly, some of the recommendations for our road network, the mobility study and the master plan, the draft master plan recommends really exploring the potential for extending certain roadways such as Admiral Cochrane here in Green, and also Gateway Village Drive, connecting that from over there by Best Buy to General's Highway at the mall. There are a couple of bridge connections that are recommended for consideration. One over Route 50 to connect to Housley Road, and then another from this part of to the east of or west of 665 over to the shopping centers, Festival at Riva and Annapolis Harbor in this area. And then third, the potential for a bridge over Route 2 connecting from the Annapolis Town Center over to where the Lidl is located currently on city property. So yeah, and then parcel connectivity along Route 2 and a connector from the Annapolis Corporate Park to Riva Road. So these were some of the roadway connections, also various intersection alignment issues to be resolved through this plan. The bicycle and pedestrian network, there's again trying to address this need to build out a complete and connected network. So a lot of recommendations for shared use paths. You'll see these in purple. Bike lanes are in green, and then filling in the gaps that exist in the sidewalk network. There are various new bike and pedestrian connections. These are shown in yellow. A lot of these are on the potential overpasses that I just mentioned on the previous slide, linking between Festival at Riva and Harbor Center, and then from Gateway Village over toward the mall. And then a lot of intersections are identified for various intersection improvements, things like ADA access, improved markings, and signaling that'll make the intersection safer for bike and pedestrian use. And so if you wanted to get more detail on the mobility study, we have it on our webpage, and that's at aacounty.org/parolegma. That stands for Growth Management Area. So if anybody wanted to dig into that a little bit. Now, transportation recommendations, there were recommendations including treatments to prioritize buses at intersections, improving the service frequency and span, and setting service priorities like 15-minute transit headways within the town center. But the big transit recommendation was something that came out of another transportation study that was finalized in 2020, and it was looking to locate a multimodal transit center somewhere in the Parole area. And the study ultimately recommended a 2-facility recommendation. One would be a multimodal transit center at Westfield Mall. This is shown on Bestgate Road, sort of near the corner with General's Highway up there. So this would be an origin and destination transit center that's focused more on local transit service and connecting that with other modes of transportation. And I will note that this is something that received $12 million of funding in the FY23 capital improvement budget. And right-of-way acquisition and design are underway, and we anticipate construction starting in early 2024. And then the second piece of this would be a facility at the Truman Park and Ride lot. And this would really focus on parking enhancements within the lot, but then providing passenger amenities in this building for commuters and a provision for local bus routes to connect in as well. The draft plan does recommend some more detailed standards for building form and facades for new development in Parole. So in terms of site design, some of the things that I talked about previously, it'd be putting most of your parking to the side or the rear of structures and screening the parking and loading areas and trash areas from the roadway. In terms of building form, ensuring that there's architectural articulation for large buildings and orienting buildings toward the streets with entries facing the streets and coordinating the building with outdoor amenity spaces. In terms of facades, just some simple provisions that will encourage development to avoid large expanses of blank walls, articulating all the walls with recesses and windows, etc., and having windows on the street front. And then I mentioned previously provisions for active frontage along key roadways that'll help ensure that the way that the site is designed really promotes more activity along the street front and engagement between the building and the street. And then finally, some additional recommendations that didn't really fit under any of what I previously talked about. The draft plan, it does recommend workforce and affordable housing as a real opportunity and a need in the area because of our transit links and employment opportunities. So there are recommendations for policies that will expand these housing opportunities, particularly in the center of Parole and near these transit sites. And a recommendation to explore incentive criteria and things like expedited site plan review for projects that include affordable housing. There are a lot of recommendations to enhance the sense of place in the area, particularly things like requiring or incentivizing development or redevelopment projects to include some publicly accessible amenities with development, things like boardwalks into, existing wooded areas, as you see in the image here, or in the example concept plan that you see on the right there, how an outdoor park area could be provided along the South Shore Trail. That's actually an area over there behind the Marshall's store in Annapolis Plaza. It's just a concept, but it's to demonstrate how developments should be thinking to really engage in these ways. Also, the idea of redevelopment as a way to better take advantage of some of the natural areas and provide access where that's appropriate to do so. And finally, the plan recommends exploring some placemaking treatments for our pedestrian and bike underpass areas. So if you look where West Street goes below US 50 or Riva Road extends below 665, there are some recommendations to add some vibrant art treatment and lighting and a little more excitement to enhance the experience beneath these areas and help improve the safety of those areas for bicycle and pedestrian users. So that's the draft plan in a nutshell. I'll stop sharing my screen now, but in terms of next steps for this plan, I mentioned that the plan has gone to the Planning Advisory Board back in March, and we're looking to introduce it to council at some point in the next coming months, and we're sort of awaiting on priority setting with our new director whenever he or she comes on board. But I thought that it was important to give a little bit of an overview of this parole master plan, because I feel like a lot of the conversations that we have as a group, where we talk about density and mixed use and housing in the right areas, we naturally gravitate toward the Parole Town Center because that is the area in the region where these things are targeted and not other parts of the region so much. So I just wanted to give everybody an overview of that and where that stands. Do you all have any questions or comments for me?
Patrick, I had one.
Sure.
So I understand how the diagrams that you show work in terms of where the potential higher density development can happen with the FARs that change from 1, 2 to up to 3, and the building heights change according to location.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if there's anything that shows what the vision of that area looks like after build out. If there's like a 3D diagram that shows, like, I wonder what these buildings look like as a compilation of structures in this area. Is that something that's been done, or is?
It's something that is in process, but no, it hasn't been completed. We did work with our GIS folks to develop a 3D model of a small portion of the core to start to test how some of these changes to the density provisions that we're recommending, how could that be built out, and what would that look like? And so we tested it on about a 2-block area, but it's not something that's been built out for the full town center yet, but it is something that our GIS and OIT folks are looking at as a potential tool for us to use in the future.
It's just interesting to me because when you see this area and the different zones that are set up and some of the ideas that you shared with us, I just start to wonder, like, I wonder what the net result in terms of housing looks like, and square footage for retail and open space and the different components of this area. I wonder what a build out of that would look like, because I don't know, I'm just interested in it. It's one of those things where when you look at zoning, things come up and down depending on where they are, and densities go up and down depending on what the zoning requirements are. Is that 1,000 houses? Is it 2,000 residential units? Is it 10,000? I'm just kind of curious about what that build out would look like in its final form if it were, 20 years from now.
For that smaller sub area that was built out and tested, I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head. They weren't significantly different from when they modeled the existing provisions that are currently in place with the overlay as it exists now in code. And so they built that out and then built out what's proposed with this master plan update. And there wasn't a significant difference. I will say the biggest difference in those in those numbers that I showed you of FAR and height and open space requirements, the main difference is in the FAR requirements. And for those of you who don't know what FAR is, it's the floor area ratio, basically how much surface area of a lot you have, and versus how many stories you can build on top of that. And the FARs currently in parole are extremely low, actually, but there's a very complicated calculation for how you achieve your FAR, and certain uses, including all housing, is exempt from an FAR calculation. And so this tries to simplify all of that by making, everything that you build counts toward that FAR, but the FARs are all bumped a good bit higher in order to accommodate that. And so that was sort of what we were testing as we were building out that model, and took a look at that. But I will say, when we get into our planned land use and zoning conversations later, we're going to be talking about how the projections of for our population projections and our housing projections line up regionally with what we're proposing in terms of zoning changes and that sort of thing. And from the regional standpoint, but we also ran that modeling for the parole town center, and we should be able to accommodate all of the potential growth in the parole town center with what we're showing here as a recommendation for these overlay provisions. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, it's look, I do this stuff all the time, right? And we're trying to figure out like how big a building can be and what the density looks like based on the requirements of the code. And it's just, when I see that, I struggle a little bit with it because I'm not sure that I understand like what that would be like in the end. And it's just interesting to think about. I mean, maybe it's too deep a dive for this group, but it sure seems to me like it would be good to know like how many houses are we talking, how many living units are we talking about, and how much open space are we talking about? You know, is it 30 acres? Those kinds of numbers are hard to grasp from the diagram. It almost seems like when I'm doing visionary stuff like that, I'm drawing like building blocks. I don't know what's in them, but I can tell you it's 20,000 feet, and if the units are 800 a unit, that's a number with the core pieces. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I can look up, excuse me, I can pull up the information that we had done in that smaller test portion of the Parole Town Center, and kind of give you a sense of what we found when we did that study. Yeah, so I can pull that up for you.
Because we've seen already like what the demand is going to be in our prior presentations based on growth curves for that type of thing. And I hear that you're saying that we've got the ability to accommodate that in the Parole Town Center, which is good. And what does that look like? It's just a question. Like what kind of numbers is that really? So just curiosity on my side. I don't know if anyone else shares that.
Well, we will be getting into, excuse me, a bit more of, I think a more trustworthy analysis is what we had done, the zoning analysis that we had done, and we're going to share that with you all when we get into our zoning and land use discussions. And it's sort of what we call a holding capacity analysis of our current zoning to understand, can we accommodate our projected growth in the region under our current zoning code. And I can tell you in this region that yes, we do seem to be able to accommodate with our existing zoning, and the Parole Town Center is well set up to handle a lot of the growth for the region. So yeah,
okay,
we'll get into that a bit in the land use and zoning discussions.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, and you may not know this or may not be able to share it, but are there entities that are coming forward and proposing, to go under the incentive program, or to even to rezone, or are they waiting for this plan to be approved?
There's a lot of interest in this plan from the development industry for sure, and
It would be.
I don't know if anybody's waiting to put forward a development. I mean, as I mentioned, this has been something that's been in the works for 5 years, and so I think people who need to move forward are probably moving forward. Anyway, there aren't significant changes to the overlay provisions from what's allowed currently. So I'm not sure that there's a lot to be gained on I think the key thing with this master plan update is really getting endorsement from council on an expanded bicycle pedestrian network, some improvements to the transit network, and these kinds of amenities within the Parole Town Center. I don't know that there's anything that's causing developers to wait right now on this plan. Anna, you had a question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious. There's so much development going on right now around the Parole
really
Town
is.
Center, especially along. I think it's Admiral Cochrane. My son's daycare. On the way there. There's this huge. It looks like apartment complex going in. So that's all great. I'm just curious. Are they in compliance with this new updated code, or they don't need to do any of the stuff that you?
No, they're under the old code. Any development that would be quote unquote in the pipeline, if they've submitted a project for review before this, before any code changes happen for the Parole Town Center, they would come in under the old provisions. And
Yeah,
that's
and I
typically
guess the reason I ask is, you know, so there's just huge apartment complex going up on Admiral Cochrane, and
Mhm.
I think it's great because it's within walking distance of the festival shopping center and the town center. But you notice that the sidewalks, there's no clear sidewalks in certain areas. They
Yeah.
just end
Mhm.
around Route 665.
Yep.
I mean, so does
Yeah.
who, I'm just curious in terms of like actual like construction, like who is responsible for connecting these sidewalks? Is this going to be something that the county handles, the state handles? How does that work? I
You
don't have
know,
experience with that.
our sidewalks tend to be built with development projects as they come in. And so it takes something like a master plan like this to really state, you know, that we need sidewalks in the Pearl Town Center of a certain width, or maybe that's in the core, they need to be a certain width. And then that gets adopted into what's called the county design manual that development follows as it comes in. That specific development, there was not a sidewalk before that development came in. Because I remember seeing people walking on the in the
Yeah, through
grass
the cutting
there.
through the parking lot and the sidewalk they put
And
in is fantastic. It's like a
mhm.
2-lane sidewalk,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
as you move towards down Riva Road towards
yep,
the shopping area, something that, you know, if somebody was living in that apartment complex, it would be it's
yep,
within walking distance, but you have to cross 665 exit ramps, and then there's a really
mhm,
old shopping center that is literally just a parking lot right up against
yeah,
Riva Road. There's
right,
no, so I guess that has to be redeveloped for a sidewalk to be put in place.
probably, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. But I will say that you're touching on something that we heard a lot of comments from people who live in Claiborne Place Apartments, and
Mhm.
which is over there by Festival at Riva, and also in the town center, the two towers there. A lot of people had commented, I can't get to over to Harbor Center. I can't go to the
Yeah, it's
Amish
all within
market,
walking distance, but it's so
and you can't get
disconnected.
there. And it's
Yeah.
so these are the things that we're trying to sort of address, is creating a network that is connected and does actually allow for people to bike and walk to areas within the
Yeah, because
town
I think
center.
shortly before the call began, I think it was Priscilla expressed some concern, like this apartment complex, it's going to be so much traffic congestion. Well, maybe
Mhm.
not, you know, if people can actually get where they need to go without having to get in their cars. So I'm excited to see that, you know, you guys are thinking ahead, but I'm also concerned that there's so much construction going on right now where it's not, you know, nobody's compelled to actually do any of the stuff that's been outlined.
Well, so they are, yeah, they are putting in, I mean, there are regulations in place though for requiring sidewalks and such
Mhm.
currently. So as redevelopment happens here or anywhere in the county, typically there are improvements over what was built in the 50s or 60s. We do have a landscape manual that you can, I've driven up in Glen Burnie, and it's very stark, the difference between an older development and then a new redevelopment immediately beside it, and the pedestrian facilities that are outlined in that landscape manual, and the actual landscape, the plants that come in. So things are improving. Stormwater regulations apply with
Sure, yeah.
redevelopment. And so but this is just really fine tuning some recommendations for the town center to really promote a more urban and dense and walkable type of environment here.
Yeah, well, I think
I'm
it's
going to
great.
piggyback on what Anna's saying, because if you look at the location of that gigantic complex, they're literally across the street from the park and ride with a commuter bus that goes right into DC.
Mhm,
And yet
mhm.
I wouldn't walk across that road. I mean,
Yep.
there's no place to walk. And so if they could do that, they can really attract some commuters from the DC area.
Right. Agreed.
Well, that was great, Patrick. Thanks for showing that to us. That's super helpful to hear what we have to look forward to in that area.
Great. Any other comments or questions for us?
Not for me.
Okay. Well, I I think that covers everything that was on our agenda for tonight then. I did have a couple of closing announcements. So I think, so circling back to the vision thing, we're going to hold that for the next meeting. Is that correct, Leo and Desiree?
I
And,
did make a couple tweaks if you want to take one more peek at it, but we can also wait. It's up to you guys.
Leo?
Well, let's
It's
go ahead
on
and put it
you.
up. Maybe we can get there. Let's take a look. We've got a little extra time here, so
Okay,
let's go ahead
let's
and see if we
see.
can put it to bed.
See if you can see this. We're looking at the right screen here. Okay.
Yes.
It looks like it does, right?
Okay, so I think what I decided was that this sentence needed like the well planned or the coordinated between jurisdictions. I just changed to city and county just because that seems to be more the issue we're talking about, or it's more direct. And I just made that its own sentence. And I'm not sure the sentence is perfect, but I pulled it out, and so it kind of took care of the issue of this being a big run-on sentence. And it also includes something about smart growth. I also added community resources here just so that it's distinct from the resources being the parks and open parks and waterways here. And then I also added affordable here for transit. What do people think? I mean, we can wordsmith this too, or if we think it's not right, we can take it out, but just a thought.
I like what you have, but I still have issues with just city and county. Just simply because we're always talking about T. Allen, and we're always talking about Route 2, and we're always talking about, major roadways. Otherwise I like it.
You prefer jurisdictions then, or just?
I prefer jurisdictions, but I'm an old bureaucrat. So it's whatever people are comfortable with.
I agree with jurisdictions. And I also want to offer one additional inclusion. So, and have a community that offers attainable housing for all.
Okay.
I don't know how the group feels about that, but
I think that's
I like
great.
that.
That's a high bar, but I love it.
but I mean, that's where we want to go, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's meant to
That's
be
right.
aspirational. Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I think it's great.
Great job, Desiree.
Yeah, really nice.
Does this accomplish? Are we satisfied, or any other thoughts?
I feel like you hit it.
I guess I'm thinking maybe we could, I like your new sentence, Desiree. Development is well planned and coordinated across jurisdictions, with stakeholders is a funny word, but with local community engagement. That's a nice word. That's something I think to add as I read this new sentence. For your all's consideration.
Do we have thoughts on that?
It's
Maybe
local- I don't-
community member engagement, because you have local and local.
Yes. Yeah, I think a different word here, maybe.
I agree.
Yeah, maybe
Or maybe
community
just like that.
collaboration. Yeah, collaboration or
Maybe like ample community engagement, or
So are we adding something different than legally is required now?
hmm.
In terms of just,
What was your question, Larry? Are we adding something different
Yeah,
than
in
what
other
is
words-
legally?
yes, and so generally if someone's going through a process, and if it's zoning by right, is community engagement required? And if it's not, are we saying we actually want to make a policy change?
I think that's what we're saying.
I mean, how about opportunities for community engagement?
Cresters.
I feel like that squares with some of what I'm hearing from you all and from the public too.
I like that.
Do we think we have enough of a consensus for a motion?
I don't know, but I'll make a motion that we accept this as our vision statement.
Leo, do we want to wait and just take some time to look at it and then vote next meeting?
You know, that's a great idea.
I
let's
like that idea.
There are
So I
people who
wanna
aren't
sleep
here
on it.
tonight that may want to provide additional comment on it. And given that we've worked this hard to get it right, let's go ahead and table a vote until the next meeting. Maybe we can start with it, Patrick and Desiree.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's great. And thank you for doing it, Desiree. Nice work.
Sure.
It's like herding cats, isn't it?
Priscilla really was the main contributor, so you can thank her.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Okay.
So what else do we want to hit as a few closing thoughts here, Patrick and Desiree, before we move on?
Yeah, if I can just there we go. Yeah, just quick announcements. Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 18th. We're going to do it here in person in the Chesapeake room where we met last time. If you need to join us virtually, let me know and I can get you set up to come in as a panelist as well. We will start discussing our strategies, our housing and transportation strategies. If you have not taken a look at those or started at least looking through that survey that we sent you, please go ahead and do so. I know some of you have. Desiree and I have not had access to see anybody's responses yet. I think Desiree, you just got access today, so we'll start taking a look at that. But yeah, we'll start on that on the 18th. Tomorrow or later this week, we will send you the remaining strategies in a draft form, and so that you can start looking at those as well. But we'll start with housing and transportation first on the 18th. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is a recent development. We are looking to have a community meeting in the Ridgely Avenue area on February 6th in the evening. And this is kind of following up on the planned land use from Plan 2040. There were a lot of applications to change planned land use in that area, and a lot of the potential changes were really deferred by the county council to the region plan. So we want to hold a community meeting in that area to talk to folks about what the vision for that area is in the future. So we'll give you some more information about that, but just wanted to put that on your calendar. You don't necessarily have to attend, but our goal is really to go and get some input from the community and bring that back to you all to share when we have our conversations about land use and zoning. And that's it. That's all I had in terms of announcements.
So what time is that? That's in the evening, Patrick, on the 6th?
Yeah, it's we said 6 p.m., right, Desiree? And it's at the Knights of Columbus building, the new facility that's kind of behind the Catholic Church there. So yeah, they were very gracious to give us that space. So
Atrium at Soaring Timbers.
yeah, it looks like a really nice place. So that's all that I had.
Patrick and Desiree, can you, when we send out the follow-up from this meeting or the announcement for the next one that you send out, every time, if you could include the information on the February meeting and the draft vision statement as it sits today, that would be great.
Will do.
Okay,
Okay.
so do you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about? Great. Well, Patrick, thank you for walking us through what's going on at Parole. It's interesting to see, and I think it is a big help for us to understand where that's all going as we consider what's happening for the rest of the region. So really appreciate it and appreciate the hard work and welcome the new people on your team helping with these things, not the least of which is the meeting minutes, which Desiree, I'm sure you're happy about. With that, unless there's any other discussion from the members of the committee, I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Who seconded?
Linda.
Okay, thanks, Linda.
Great, great. Well, thanks again so much, everyone, and nice to see you. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in person at our next meeting.
Y'all take care.
Same
Great.
to you,
Bye-bye.
Lou. Nice seeing you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.